Raoul had slain the Demon King. With evil vanquished and peace restored, he believed the world could finally breathe freely again. But peace was not what awaited him. Instead of glory, he was met with treachery. The princess, once his ally, declared him a threat to the crown. For the crime of rejecting her affection, she ordered his execution. Before the gathered court, she proclaimed Raoul obsolete. His usefulness ended with the Demon King's fall. Now, as a hero who had outlived his purpose and wielded too much power, he was dangerous. Bleeding out on the cold stone floor, Raoul's last cry echoed through the halls, a vow to kill her and punish every traitor who had betrayed him. Death came swiftly, and with it, silence. Then light. Raoul awoke in the white void from before his birth. He realized he was truly dead. He turned to the goddess of love. "Did it please you," he asked bitterly, "to watch me die in vain?" The goddess only sighed. "If it happened, then it was meant to be, but perhaps it is not the end." She knelt beside him. "I can grant you strength once more, but you'll have to make me suffer first." Raoul glared at her. "If you ever loved me, bring me back. Let me destroy those who butchered me like a dog." 1 year later, in the Kingdom of Curves, the opulent halls of Yulbach Castle buzzed with wedding preparations. Princess Victoria, dressed in an exquisite snow-white gown, stood before her mirror. The maids praised the way it matched her fair skin and pale hair, confident her fiancé Emile would be enchanted. But Victoria's expression twisted into rage. "Do I look pleased?" she snapped. "This dress is hideous. Bring me another, and remove that maid who dared waste my time." The terrified servants bowed and scattered. One girl was dragged away. Commander Sandra watched silently. This outburst was only the latest omen. Soldiers had been slaughtered at the gates days ago, their killer still unknown. Whether demon or human, none could say. The royal knights had found no leads. Sandra approached the princess. "Forgive me, Your Highness, but I must speak plainly. Holding a parade now is unwise. We don't know what we're dealing with. You may be in danger." Victoria turned her cold gaze on him. "If I so much as scratch my skin," she said, voice sharp as glass, "I will erase your entire order." Sandra tried again. "Our rulers are dying, one by one, from some unknown plague, and strong warriors are falling without explanation. We must be vigilant." Victoria laughed lightly. "Old men dying doesn't concern me. They've lived their time. I haven't." Sandra's jaw tightened. "Even on their deathbeds, they begged blessings upon you, Princess. Please, delay the parade until we find who killed the gate guards. I believe these deaths are connected." But Victoria waved him off. "I'll be surrounded by shields, and the Demon King is dead. So are all the heroes. What could I possibly fear?" Sandra bowed low, hiding his grim thoughts. "This woman, she's merciless, and she calls it strength." In the streets of Radosno, the people cheered as Princess Victoria's carriage passed. They reached out, begging for a wave. She smiled regally. "See how they love me," she whispered to no one in particular. Prince Emile Orkler, riding beside her, gave her a sidelong glance. "Still as ruthless as ever," he murmured. "My mother is thrilled about our union, and I must admit so am I, though you've had your eye on me a lot lately." Victoria smirked. "I have no issue with your noble bloodline, but beyond that, your value is limited." Inwardly, she considered Emile useful, a man of pedigree, beauty, and no intellect, perfect for a puppet king and for siring an heir. If looks were all that mattered, this would be easier, but ambition demanded more. She recalled the moment she first met Raoul, his eyes burning with truth and conviction as he vowed to slay the Demon King, no matter the cost. She had wanted to defile those eyes, and she had. He died by her hand, broken and betrayed, and she had enjoyed every second. Now the Order of Knights arrived at the parade, the commander leading them. The crowd erupted in cheers. Victoria sat back, watching the kingdom she ruled with an iron smile. "This world is mine," she thought, "and I will take even more." As the high priest began blessing the union of Princess Victoria and Prince Emile, solemn prayers echoed through the grand cathedral. They asked the gods for happiness and prosperity in the royal marriage. Raoul, gathered in the crowd, smirked and said, "Victoria." She was stunned upon hearing that voice. Then blood splattered all across her face. The priest was cut into pieces, blood spilling everywhere. Panic erupted among the crowd as he removed the cloak. Victoria was baffled. Then, as if pulled by fate, Raoul stepped forward and locked eyes with Victoria. "It's been a long time," he said coldly. "How have you been, Princess?" Victoria froze. You're supposed to be dead." Raoul smiled faintly. "I was, but I returned, for one reason only, to destroy you." He remembered well the strange encounter in the void between life and death. There he had met her, the goddess of love, a radiant, sorrowful being who claimed to care deeply for him. Yet in life she had done nothing to stop his betrayal. In death she only offered riddles and obsession. She had begged him to scold her, to hate her, for that, she said, was love. Perhaps, he thought, because she was the goddess of love, she clung to him blindly, no matter how broken he became. Raoul narrowed his eyes. Useful, he thought. This deluded goddess might still serve his purpose. Then give me my power. Let me return. "But you are not yet purified," she protested. "A soul tainted by vengeance cannot return to the world of the living." "I don't care about the rules of your kind," Raoul snapped. "If you truly love me, prove it." "If I break divine law," she whispered, "I could lose everything, even my place among the gods." "Then lose it," Raoul said, "just like I lost everything because of them." The goddess hesitated, then pleaded, "Stay with me here in paradise. I'll give you eternal peace." Raoul laughed bitterly. "Peace? My only joy now will come from watching them suffer. If I'm the savior, then I'll grant salvation by purging this rotten world in blood." Even then, she looked at him with awe. "Even if you fall into darkness, you'll still be beautiful to me." She's insane, Raoul thought. A twisted, obsessed deity. But if madness was the price of his return, so be it. The goddess nodded at last. "Your happiness is my own. Even if it means our parting brings me pain, I send you forth, Raoul, with my blessing." She raised her hand, divine light surging around her. "Then go, Raoul. A new legend begins. Be the hero the world deserves, though it may fear you." As the light consumed him, Raoul's voice echoed into the void. "It's time to cleanse this damned world." As he approached the palace gates, the guards stopped him. "This area is off limits," one of them said. "The princess is getting married." A smirk tugged at Raoul's lips. "A wedding, huh? How quaint." In the present moment, that same smirk sent a shiver down Victoria's spine. Panic flickered in her eyes as she hissed, "Filthy blood!" Raoul chuckled coldly. "So, other people's lives are filth to you now?" Sandler stepped forward, shielding Victoria with his blade drawn. "This creature must be a demon imitating the hero's face. He even murdered a messenger of God." Raoul turned to the priests with visible disgust. "These? Messengers of God? Don't make me laugh." He exposed the church's corruption, recounting the wicked deeds committed under the guise of holiness. Victoria's voice trembled with fury. "Show us your real form, monster." Raoul's eyes narrowed. "This is my true form." "Liar!" she screamed. "You should be dead." Raoul stepped closer, gripping her by the hair and pulling her face toward his. "Then take a good look," he growled. "See for yourself." Seen. Sandler stepped in front of Victoria, sword raised, but before he could act, 5 knights behind him collapsed, heads severed cleanly by unseen magic. The crowd gasped, frozen in terror. Then came the panic. Screams erupted as people shoved and trampled over each other in their desperate attempt to flee. Raoul watched the chaos with a twisted amusement. "Don't run. Stay and watch," he said, voice laced with mockery. "This is a rare performance, and the star is your beloved princess." Someone from the crowd cried out, "Are you going to kill us too?" Raoul only laughed. "Silence!" Victoria's voice cut through the panic. "You are my people. What are you afraid of?" She turned to Raoul defiantly. "I don't fear this monster pretending to be a hero." Raoul exhaled, almost disappointed. "I told you, I'm no monster. I've been reborn, Victoria. Accept it." She glared at him, then barked an order. "Sandler, kill him!" But Sandler's body wouldn't move. Raoul's magic had frozen him in place. Panic flickered in the knight's eyes. "Cut off your leg if you must," she hissed. "Just save me." Raoul tilted his head and sneered. "You can't even move, Sandler. What can you possibly do now?" He turned to Emil. "Come now, show us your devotion." I can't move," Emil cried in terror. "Help me, someone, please." "Quit screaming," Victoria snapped. "You're embarrassing me." Raoul chuckled. "Seems like the prince has a mommy complex. How charming." The crowd stood frozen as Raoul's magic seized the stage. Everyone's in place. The actors are ready. "But tell me, princess, why no white dress? Blood looks so much more dramatic on white." Without warning, he seized her dress and tore it down the front. The fabric shredded under his grip, falling to the ground. Gasps echoed through the onlookers. Eyes widened. Victoria stood, trembling but defiant, baring her body to the crowd, her glare sharp as blades. "What are you going to do to me?" she spat. Raoul smirked. "Didn't you always say you wanted children?" Her face went pale. "You dare lay a hand on me?" she whispered, voice shaking. You're nothing. A low-born filth. If you touch me, I'll make your life hell." Then, astonishingly, she composed herself. "Apologize now, Raoul," she said coldly, "and I might forgive you." Sandler, still trembling, forced out, "Fight him honorably, like a man." Raoul glanced back, eyes glinting. "Honorably?" he scoffed. "Is that how you captured me last time?" Before the Demon King's fall, Raoul had only one dream: peace. In his quiet village, he trained tirelessly to defeat the Demon King, and the people stood by him like family. Men, women, and even children lent their support, believing in him. That bond, that warmth, became his reason to fight. But after Raoul's victory and his rejection of Princess Victoria, everything changed. Consumed by spite, Victoria ordered the execution of every man, woman, and child in Raoul's village. Not a single soul was spared, all just to see the look of despair on Raoul's face. When Raoul returned home, he was met with silence. Lifeless bodies lay scattered across the place that once overflowed with laughter and love. His heart stopped. The warmth he once knew was gone, cold and stained in blood. Then came the voice of a stranger. A man emerged from the shadows, flanked by guards. "Seize him." "It wasn't my fault," Sandra said, her tone stiff. "I was only following the princess's orders. The destruction of your village was a tribute, a necessity." Sandra's voice grew louder, defensive. "Those villagers were meaningless. Just like our soldiers, they were ready to die for her. Their lives meant nothing to the crown." Then she fell silent, startled. Her voice had echoed across the courtyard. Raoul smiled coldly. "I amplified your words with magic. Thank you, Sandra. You've just exposed the truth I needed the world to hear." Gasps rippled through the gathered crowd. "Could this really be Princess Victoria's doing?" someone whispered. "She killed the hero's village?" another murmured. Victoria's face turned red with rage. "Sandra!" she screamed. Raoul chuckled darkly. "Let's have a bit more fun, shall we?" He cast a subtle spell, taking control of Sandra's hand. Before anyone could react, it struck Victoria across the face with a sharp crack. "You hit my beautiful face?" Victoria shrieked, clutching her cheek. Sandra trembled. I can't control my body." Again, Raoul forced Sandra's hand to strike. Then again and again. With each blow, the princess's face bruised and swelled. "Not so beautiful anymore, is it?" Raoul mocked. "But don't worry, your true punishment hasn't begun." He stepped closer, eyes shadowed with pain and fury. "You'll answer for my sister." He remembered the moment before he left for the war. His sister, pregnant and glowing, had smiled and laughed off his concerns. She told him not to worry, that she'd be fine, that the saint and the church would protect her. She said she was more worried about him. She promised to pray for him every day until he returned. But when Raoul was betrayed and captured, dragged before Victoria like a criminal, all he could do was ask, "What was my crime?" Victoria's answer cut deep. "Your crime is existing." She told him she only needed a hero to defeat the Demon King. And now that the war was over, he was nothing but trash. When he demanded to know why his village burned, she simply said, "Because you made me do it." She even offered him salvation, if he submitted to her. He spat at the offer. "I despise the look in your eyes." Then she ordered Sandra to take him to the church. What Raoul saw there would haunt him forever, his sister's lifeless body laid out like a sacrificial offering. Now in the present, Raoul summoned a powerful magic circle. Energy crackled around him as he cast the spell. Victoria staggered, screaming. Her stomach twisted in agony. Blood spilled from her lips. Raoul watched without pity. "This pain is nothing compared to what you've done. Killing you quickly would be mercy. I'm not here to be merciful." Her screams grew louder. "If you keep shouting," he warned, "you'll bleed out. But I won't let that happen, yet. I want you awake." Victoria trembled. "This is impossible. You were mine. You were my tool." Raoul crouched beside her. "I'm only giving you what you gave me. Retribution." He turned to the knights. "Don't think you're safe. Your day will come. Every one of you will face what you deserve." Then he looked to the crowd and raised his voice. "The performance ends here." Victoria roared, "Kill him!" Kill Roll now, or face my wrath." The knights obeyed. Swords pierced Roll's body from every direction. Blood dripped from his lips. Victoria laughed in triumph. "Now die and repent." But Roll just looked up and smiled. "Did you forget?" he said. "I'm the hero. I don't die that easily." He ripped the swords from his body, one by one. "You'll see me again, when your face is beautiful enough for the final act." With that, he turned and began to walk away. But then he stopped, facing her one last time. "Oh, and congratulations on your wedding." He looked at the crowd. "Tell me, doesn't she look lovely?" Then he bowed deeply. "Bless Her Highness, the princess." Later, Raoul arrived at the ruins of the old church. He stood in silence, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. Gently, he placed them at the spot where his sister had been slain. His voice was soft, almost breaking. "I should have come back sooner." Then, without hesitation, he raised his hand and cast a spell. Flames erupted from the ground, consuming the church in a roaring blaze. The fire reflected in his eyes, rage, grief, and resolve. As the structure crackled and crumbled, Raoul suddenly froze. A faint silhouette appeared in the flames. It was her, his sister. For a moment, Raoul was stunned, then let out a dry chuckle. "Now I can even see ghosts, huh?" He looked up at her, expression softening. "The people are starting to question Victoria. Some are too scared to speak, others are already whispering rebellion. Even though they're hunting me, fear is beginning to choke them." He glanced at the burning rubble. "No magic can fix what's been done. They've sealed the capital with a barrier. No one gets in or out, not even a rat." He smiled bitterly. "Oh, and that priest, the one who sold you out, Gustav, he's dead." He told her how Gustav had lived like royalty, lounging in his golden mansion while stealing from the poor. How he'd squealed in disbelief when Raoul showed up alive at his door. "I revealed every dirty secret he had," Raoul said. "He begged, promised me gold, women, even influence, thought he could buy his life." He scoffed. "So I gave him the same water torture he loved using on others. Let him drown slowly in his own fear." His voice turned cold. "There's no forgiveness anymore. Not for them. Not after what they did to you, to all of us." Raoul took one last look at the ghostly image of his sister. He said, "I'll finish this." He turned away, the fire roaring behind him. "The second act of this comedy begins now." Back in the castle, she glared at Sandra, the knight who had failed her. "You pathetic wretch," Victoria spat. "Why didn't you cut off your legs to protect me?" She grabbed a whip from beside her and struck Sandra. "Useless!" Sandra whimpered, trying to speak, but Victoria screamed over her. "Silence! Silence! Silence!" Each word was punctuated by another lash. Her breaths came in ragged gasps. "I can't leave the castle. I can't kill. I can't do anything. It's like I'm cursed." Finally, panting from rage and exhaustion, she ordered coldly, "Continue torturing her until she can no longer scream." She turned to her soldiers, eyes burning with madness. "Find the hero, kill him the moment you see him, and bring me his head." The messenger had been racing through the woods, convinced that he had to deliver a secret message as fast as possible. He kept thinking that their only ally was the one person capable of standing against the hero Raoul. Spotting his horse trembling, he asked it what had frightened it so much. Upon noticing a group of goblins, he cursed them, muttering that he had no time to deal with such vile creatures. To his horror, he realized that the Goblin King himself was pursuing him. For a moment, he believed this was the end. But just as that thought struck him, it dawned on him that His Excellency had arrived in time to save him. The saviour, assessing the situation, remarked that the young man had been tracked by a pack and asked whether he had been hurt. Advising him to stay close, the knight assured the messenger of his protection. The messenger was stunned by how many goblins his rescuer had slain in an instant, thinking that it made sense why this man was hailed as the nation's greatest swordsman. Later, the head swordsman informed his sons that he would be leaving for the royal capital the next day. The children guessed that he was probably going there to deal with the rumoured resurrected hero. Their father, grinning, confirmed that the rumour had reached them swiftly. He explained that a messenger from the Imperial Guard had arrived earlier that morning, requesting his help in dealing with the hero. Adam expressed his expectations, saying he wouldn't expect anything less from his father, and asked him to kill the hero without mercy. The swordsman's wife observed that he was particularly soft on Connie. He later told his son that he looked forward to the day when they could fight side by side. Meanwhile, a young servant asked what he should prepare for the messenger's meal. A more experienced servant quickly apologized on behalf of his colleague, explaining that he was still new. The master, however, informed them both that the messenger had already left in a hurry, deeply concerned about the royal capital, and would not need any food. A maid then apologized for keeping the master waiting and offered the main course. The master replied that she had finally arrived and complimented the aroma of the dish, remarking that there was nothing better to eat before a battle, especially since he had hunted the prey himself earlier that day. He reminded the children that one must hunt their own game. The children found it cute and expressed their desire to do the same. After tasting the meat, the swordsman declared it delicious and said it carried the taste of victory. He also said he was grateful to the messenger for his efforts. The next day, he and his swordsman prepared to depart from Castle Obrith. The children saw them off, asking their father to return with the hero's head. Once he had left, the children decided to go hunting with the old toy. Connie remarked that things were noisy because Adam was breaking its throat. Their mother commented that the old toy would no longer be needed since their father would surely bring back a new one. In excitement, the children competed to destroy the toy, eager to finish it off first. The sight of the bloodied toy thrilled them. Adam shouted that he would be the one to kill it. From a distance, Raoul, who had been observing them, mocked them, calling them stinking brats and remarking how amusing they looked playing with fire. He said he intended to join their game, which would soon become far more entertaining. About a month before the wedding procession, guards at the city gate ordered Raoul to leave. One of the soldiers remarked that he looked familiar, but couldn't recall from where. Although the soldiers recognized him as Raoul the hero, they couldn't believe it, since he was supposed to be dead. They encircled him, mocking that he was probably angry because they had raped and killed every woman he had cared for, laughing that the memories were unforgettable. Raoul responded that any of them would be a good choice to test his new powers. It was, he said, time to begin. As the soldiers begged him to stop, they claimed they were only following the princess's orders. Raoul coldly stated that he was a heretic like Victoria. Turning to the terrified children, Raoul commented on how nice the weather was. They screamed to be untied and threatened him with the wrath of their father, General Brown. Raoul instructed the servants to dig faster since the sun was already setting. He told the children that he owed them a special favor, which he would repay later, but for now they should remain calm and quiet. One of the servants called out that something had been found. Raoul offered to inspect it. When the servant hesitated, claiming not to understand, Raoul warned him not to lie. He urged the others to do their best. In the twisted game he was playing, Raoul noted that Rico Kanyech had scored a point and taken the lead, though it was still not enough, considering how many people had died in that wretched castle. Rico begged to be released, and a maid cried out that more remains had been discovered. Raoul remarked that it looked like more brutal evidence had surfaced, and asked Rico whether the general had eaten the same meat the previous day. When Rico hesitated, Raoul warned him again not to lie. Raoul sneered that it was unsurprising the servants were as rotten as their masters, noting that they had clearly earned money by dismembering people and burying the remains. The children shouted that once their father returned, he would send Raoul to hell. Raoul calmly replied that there was no need for yelling, as he had already informed the general who would be arriving soon. At that moment, the swordsman's wife decided that she would rescue the children immediately, believing that a single poison arrow would be enough to kill the Goblin King. She declared that Raoul would be the main course for that evening's dinner. Her children cheered, saying they wouldn't even need their father to take care of such trash. Their mother would handle it all. Raoul remarked that it was time to untie them both and give them the special favor he had initially said he didn't want to grant. Moments later, the children screamed in horror as they saw their mother die by her own arrow. Raoul explained that she had been too weak and added that they would need to fulfill their duties before their father returned. Meanwhile, the general instructed a servant to water the horses. But soon after, the servant shouted that something unholy was lurking nearby. When the general asked about the commotion, the servant reported that there was something strange and frightening behind the bushes. The general noticed an eerie bright light and gradually came to the horrifying realization that it was the messenger they had supposedly killed the day before. The spirit of the ambassador then informed him that Raoul and his children were waiting for his arrival. Trembling, the general attempted to ask what the ghost meant by that. Elsewhere, the goddess of love, watching the events unfold, pondered aloud about what Raoul might do in his pursuit of vengeance. She confessed with glee that she was jealous of Princess Victoria, clearly delighted by the cruel twists of fate. Raoul reflected that time passed swiftly when filled with purpose and asserted that those murderers deserved what was coming. He noted how convenient dark magic could be, especially since it allowed one to witness the past of any individual. As he observed the memories of the servants, he saw how gleeful they had been during each killing and how they had profited from the slaughter. He admitted that he had once been ignorant of human nature. What had taken place here, he mused, was more befitting of demons, and he placed the blame squarely on their master. When General Brown arrived, Raoul greeted him with mock warmth, saying he had arrived earlier than expected and that everyone had been anticipating him. Gesturing toward the corpse of the general's wife, Raoul described it as a masterpiece created by the general's own sons, a grotesque piece of art. He taunted the general further, remarking on the diligence with which his children had worked on their mother. The general, consumed by fury, roared and demanded to know where his children were. Raoul urged him to calm down and suggested he take a closer look at the masterpiece. When the general repeated his demand, Raoul warned him not to waste energy trying to attack him with a sword. He reassured him that the children were still alive and again invited him to examine the scene more closely. He asked if it didn't remind the general of something. Perhaps in hometown, the village of Baden. As memories came flooding back, Raoul found himself recalling his childhood. He had once spent peaceful days picking mushrooms and talking with his older sister, who would praise his work. Their mother used to cook delicious meals and remind them to wash their hands before eating. Baden had been a small, tranquil village in the western region of the Kauri Kingdom, Raoul's birthplace. He remembered one strange but joyful day when he and his sister were hunting a rabbit for dinner. But then Uncle Hans arrived, gravely wounded, to report that their village had been attacked. General Brown, who had come afterward, inquired whether there had been any survivors and claimed he had arrived to help. He expressed his shock at the brutality of the demons and even asked Raoul if the body hanging from the tree was truly their mother's. At that time, the general explained that the light surrounding Raoul was the mark of a hero. He suggested that the resentment burning in the boy's heart must have awakened latent powers. The general had then asked Raoul to accompany him to the castle, apologizing for not arriving sooner to protect the village. Raoul had accepted and began his training in the royal capital. He hadn't known then that everything had been orchestrated for someone else's gain. Reflecting on it now, he admitted that he had once misunderstood the nature of demons and had been foolish enough to believe everything the general's men told him. General Brown then asked if Raoul's current actions were driven by that same old desire for revenge. With twisted pride, the general confirmed that he had been the one to burn down Baden. He confessed that committing genocide under the king's orders had been exhilarating, and expressed regret only that he had failed to kill Raoul back then. Even if Raoul was now a hero, the general declared himself the strongest man in the kingdom. The general recalled how Raoul's mother had tried to protect the village boy, and how, after killing her, he had cooked her remains. He had found the taste of her meat surprisingly tender. Raoul responded coldly that none of it shocked him anymore. He had already known everything. That was why, he said, he had done the same to the general's wife. He then laughed, questioning whether the general truly believed he was still the strongest after doing the same thing over and over for years. Raoul found it all terribly dull. The general shouted back that Raoul was spouting nonsense and insisted on his superiority. Raoul, unfazed, told him it was good to be confident, because the time had come to light up the stage. He declared that he would tear the general's children apart. Raoul revealed that the general's sons were being held in the dungeon beneath his estate. If the general wished to save them, he would have to defeat Raoul in combat. General Brown had declared that it was all fine by him and vowed that once he claimed victory, he and his sons would feast on Raoul's flesh. He roared that Raoul's end had come. In response, Raoul stated that such a feeble attack could never have reached him and announced that it was now his turn to strike. However, the general merely laughed, claiming Raoul's blow was far too weak to matter. Raoul then calmly explained that the general had already been pinned to the ground, despite all the effort he had poured into his attacks. In vicious delight, General Brown attempted to burn Raoul to ash, but to his dismay, Raoul appeared unfazed. He said that this was exactly the kind of moment he had been waiting for. With an unsettling calm, Raoul asked the general if he was already out of breath, commenting that it had all gone by quickly and should now be brought to an end. The general warned Raoul not to underestimate him, insisting once more that he was the strongest man in the kingdom. But Raoul struck again and asked mockingly if that wasn't the same man who had been boasting only moments ago, now lying flat like a fallen log. The general screamed that he would never lose, that all of this had to be some kind of joke. Raoul asked if the general truly still believed he had a chance to fight, pointing out that, with biting sarcasm, Raoul suggested the general give it his best shot and reach him soon, though he added that he was merely teasing. Then he commented that the situation looked rather grim for the general and invited him to try attacking again. The general, filled with rage, simply hurled a curse at Raoul, calling him a bastard. But Raoul, unfazed, encouraged him to give it everything he had left. General Brown began to scream, questioning why he couldn't beat Raoul if he truly was the strongest man. Raoul responded that perhaps he had been playing with the general for too long, and that it was finally time for everyone to head to dinner. With mock sympathy, he advised the general to accept his loss, pointing out that he was already defeated and barely conscious. Raoul added that if the general still had his sword, he wouldn't even need his hands anymore. With cruel cheerfulness, Raoul announced that he had prepared a special dinner and was certain the general would enjoy it. He invited him to go straight to the feast. When the general turned to his children and confessed that he couldn't move, Raoul said he hadn't expected the general to faint just from the pain. When the general insulted him and demanded to know what had become of his children, Raoul replied that it wasn't anything out of the ordinary. He had simply copied what others had done before. He explained that the drug he had used had actually been found in the general's own house, specifically in the basement of his wife's home, when he had gone to bind the children. While exploring the dungeon, Raoul had stumbled upon several unconscious people from the castle. He asked the general's sons if their mother was responsible. The children, in tears, had only managed to say that their mother was dead. That was when Raoul discovered the drug. He explained that the general's wife had developed a concoction that was disturbing on many levels. Her family, renowned throughout the kingdom for producing elite healers, apparently had secrets far darker than their reputation. Raoul declared that he planned to visit her family next time and pass along a little message on the general's behalf. Then, with a chilling grin, Raoul proclaimed that the iron plate had finally heated up enough, just in time for the feast to begin. He announced that the day's ingredients were 2 lambs in 1 bowl. He added that he would prepare the meat right there so that everyone could see just how fresh it was. General Brown hissed that Raoul didn't have to go through with this, but Raoul joyfully declared that he would begin with a roast of the shoulder blades. The general screamed at him to stop. Raoul replied that he would use butter and season it with salt and pepper, assuring that the meat was perfectly fresh. When the general shouted at him not to do it, Raoul merely advised him to open his mouth so he could help him savor the dish. With a satisfied tone, Raoul asked if it was really that delicious, saying it was his personal favorite and that it shouldn't be dropped on the floor. He even commented on how impressive it was that the general swallowed the entire piece. The general, horrified, called Raoul a heretic. Raoul replied that he was shocked to be called such a thing by the very man who had committed the same acts against others. Raoul announced that next on the menu would be the thigh, the ribs, the tripe, and the tongue. A complete meal, he claimed, prepared specially for the general. Then he turned to the general's sons and stated that it was their turn. He said they would be served bull meat and asked the general if he had any specific requests for their menu. He suggested starting with the shoulder, noting that it too had excellent meat. Adam, one of the general's sons, had squealed in delight and said he loved meat. Raoul, amused, commented that like father, like son, and that the boy looked utterly blissful. General Brown had pleaded with the king to spare his eldest son, his heir, insisting that he didn't care what happened to the younger one. If someone had to die, he had said, then let it be the younger son. Raoul, unmoved, had reminded the general of how his own mother had once pleaded for her son's life in the very village the general had burned down. He told the general to recall what he had done to that woman's body, warning that he would now meet the same fate. Terrified, General Brown had screamed and begged for someone to save him. Raoul had declared that since the general's entire family was now dead, the performance was over, and that only the living could swallow their hatred long enough to take revenge. He had then expressed his satisfaction, claiming that the demons of Killer Bill's castle had at last been destroyed. Raoul mentioned that he'd even found a convenient souvenir from the event and suggested it was time to move on and enjoy the spoils elsewhere. Cries for help had reportedly been heard from the National Pharmaceutical Research Institute at the Altman boarding house. There, Dr. Wren Bennick had expressed her fascination with discovering how many body parts a person could lose before dying. She had declared her intention to add the test subject's pretty legs to her collection. Curious about the limits of the human brain, she had wondered aloud what would happen if it were replaced with an ape's brain, even contemplating what could be done with a child's brain, and how thrilling it would be to experiment on it. Upon hearing a knock at the door, she had calmly stated that the visitor could enter. Military commander and councillor Lucas Eckhart had entered and apologized for interrupting, explaining that he was there to collect the waste. Wren Bennick had told him he was early, and that 2 new bodies had just been added. He had then asked if the number had changed and whether he would receive additional pay for the extra bodies. He had added that he didn't mind more corpses as long as he was paid, and asked when the payment would be made. Wren Bennick had assured him that she would pay, noting internally that he was always obsessed with money and quite shrewd. She then asked for confirmation, whether the goal was indeed to create immortal soldiers. The scientific director of the Dog Costa Institute had inquired whether she could actually achieve such a feat. Wren Bennick had raised a concern, asking whether soldiers who could never die might eventually become problematic. Dog Costa had countered that the priority was creating warriors who wouldn't fall in battle after facing a single monster. Wren Bennick had explained that even so-called immortality wouldn't matter if the body decomposed. When asked what she meant, she had proposed the idea of making these soldiers curable as a safeguard, suggesting the use of a drug that would eventually cause them to self-destruct, but only after their strength had been used to its fullest against the enemy. Dog Costa had found the idea brilliant and suggested they begin development at once. Meanwhile, his son Johannes had asked the nuns if the wounded soldiers were present, stating that he planned to move them to the lab, as Dr. calls. Bennick had developed a cure. He had claimed that the medicine could heal anyone and that there was enough for all injured soldiers. Dr. Bennick, however, had admitted that the initial trial had failed. Every subject had turned into a cannibal. Therefore, she had said, the work would require more time and additional test subjects, which she asked Dog Costa to provide. Some people had then asked whether helping her with the experiment would truly allow them to live in a noble house. Wren Bennick had confirmed it, saying that all they needed to do was drink the drug. She had then declared the start of the next experiment. Yet again, the attempt had failed, with the subjects turning into people too quickly, forcing her to move on to the next batch. Dog Costa had then told the people that they could waive their debts to him if they agreed to participate in the doctor's experiments. The people had agreed to those terms. Eventually, Ren Bennick had announced that the strength and duration of the drug were now satisfactory and that a berserker had finally been born. Dog Costa had congratulated her and immediately suggested administering the drug to the worthless soldiers. Their first task was to handle cargo transport, and it was noted that the hero Raoul was currently fighting on the front lines. The enhanced soldiers, it was said, could serve as supply support for him. They had said that they would repay Johans for saving them back when they lived in the slums. Johans had informed the soldiers that they had arrived at their designated resting place and could now lower their cargo. He had explained that the path ahead would lead through a forest teeming with monsters, making the journey extremely dangerous. To ensure their safety, he had told them that they would need to take a special drug. Raoul had remarked that it was time to begin what he considered a fun and thrilling game. He had then turned to the general and asked if he agreed with him. Dog Costa expressing disbelief at the situation, insisting that the idea of his daughter's entire family being killed was ridiculous. He had pointed out that her husband, General Brown, had always boasted proudly about his strength. Dog Costa had then questioned the cost they might incur if anything were to happen, and had wondered whether it would be better to transfer the soldiers from the research institute to the royal capital. Johans had agreed with his father's assessment and had suggested calling the military commander to send reinforcements, adding that he had no desire to die like his younger sister. Ren Bennick had tried to reassure them, saying there was no need to worry, because as long as they had access to her poison, even someone like Raoul would be powerless to harm them. Johans, skeptical, had asked how she planned to poison the hero. In response, Ren Bennick had told him to use his brain and stop panicking. When Johans accused her of mocking him, Dog Costa had intervened, shouting that it was the worst possible moment for an argument. Lucas Eckhart had urged everyone to remain calm and approach the situation rationally. Dog Costa, still tense, had wondered aloud whether Lucas was truly the only person sent to protect them. Johans had whispered to his father that, according to rumors, it was easier to send Lucas to the battlefield alone than to deploy hundreds of regular soldiers. Lucas had then referenced a warning letter from the capital, saying it clarified their situation. He had asked whether anyone knew anything about the revenge Raoul had spoken of. Ren Bennick had claimed ignorance, while Johans had questioned whether Raoul truly wanted revenge for something that had happened in the past. Before he could finish, the doctor had interrupted him with a shout, declaring there was no justification for Raoul's actions and calling him a traitor who had gone insane. Dog Costa had immediately warned her to lower her voice, as her words might cause serious trouble if Raoul heard them. Lucas Eckhart had then speculated that there might be deeper circumstances at play. He had suggested that the doctor might be right, that the so-called hero was simply a fool, ignorant of how the world really worked. Even if Raoul had become a vengeance-obsessed killer, Lucas had said he wasn't someone to be feared. But Lucas had also demanded that they tell him what they had done to provoke Raoul's fury, warning that unless they spoke up, he would not be able to protect them. Dog Costa had hesitantly admitted that the cause might have been related to the experimental drug given to soldiers during the war, something that had been classified as top secret. Lucas had responded that everything would be fine as long as they stayed calm and that he was on their side. When Dog Costa had questioned his motives, Lucas had stated that he was likely the only one who could deal with someone like Raoul on equal footing. He had then described General Brown as a brute, unlike himself. Dog Costa had assured Lucas of his full trust and had promised to pay him whatever he wanted. Suddenly, both the doctor and Gans had shouted in alarm upon spotting a monstrous figure outside the window. They had asked if the creature was General Brown. Ren Bennick had begged Lucas to drive the monster away immediately, but he had advised patience, explaining that the general appeared to have something to say. The general, now little more than a puppet, had muttered that everyone within the research institute was trapped. According to him, no one inside would be able to escape, except those who managed to flee before midnight. They had 10 minutes, he had warned, to run and survive or stay and fight. Johans, terrified, had screamed and rushed to his father for protection. Lucas had reminded them that their enemy was waiting for them to fall into confusion. Ren Bennick had tried to downplay the threat, saying Raoul was merely manipulating the general's corpse. Lucas had interjected, noting that Raoul had always believed in an eye for an eye, and that this was exactly such a situation. He had urged everyone to confess what they had done to earn the hero's wrath. Lucas had specifically asked about the soldiers who were once Raoul's favourites, questioning whether they had truly been killed. Dog Costa had replied that they had only administered a performance-enhancing drug, which had been developed in the Research Institute and distributed to Raoul's supply soldiers. That, he claimed, was the entire story. However, he had also admitted that the drug's side effects had caused the soldiers' deaths, but no one had cared, as those men had merely been considered expendable pawns. He had added that the mission had at least succeeded in eliminating all the monsters in the forest that day. Ren Bennick had proudly insisted that her drug had granted those worthless soldiers power and that they should have been grateful. Lucas had then asked if the drug was still securely stored at the Institute. At this, Johans had shouted in panic, declaring that if the drug was stolen, the entire Research Institute would be transformed into a house of monsters. Lucas Eckhart had said he would hear the full details later, but for now they needed to reach the drug immediately. Ren Bennick had agreed to guide them to the storage room, and the rest had decided to follow Lucas without delay. Along the way, Eckhart had questioned what exactly it meant for the Institute to become a house of monsters, considering that they were supposedly dealing with nothing more than a performance-enhancing drug. Dog Costa had replied that this information was classified and not meant to be disclosed. Lucas had commented that such secrecy seemed out of place given the current circumstances. Ren Bennick had led them to the storeroom and moved to open the door. But instead of the expected drug, they had found only a note left behind by Raoul. The note mockingly read, "He who had time has already eaten." Dog Costa had declared that they were being made fools of, and it had become too dangerous to remain. The doctor had agreed, urging everyone to evacuate immediately, only to realize in horror that dark magic had sealed all the exits. Raoul, appearing suddenly, had remarked that choosing General Brown as his companion was the right decision, since the man was capable of carrying the heavy vials and had proven useful. At the sight of the hero, the Institute staff had screamed and begun to flee. Raoul had announced that the time for interesting games was drawing near. He had ordered General Brown to start first. He had instructed the general not to kill anyone, but simply to gather the staff into a pile, adding sarcastically that the general was being quite rude. The Institute employees had begged for mercy, offering to do anything Raoul wanted. Raoul had told them he needed help with something. When a scientist asked what it was, Raoul had revealed that he had a drug, and they were to ingest it. The staff had been horrified, but Raoul had insisted that one of them take the drug. He had claimed he needed to observe the effects directly. Once the first subject had transformed into a berserker, Raoul had questioned whether he felt an insatiable thirst, commenting on the absurdity of such power. The other staff members had shouted in panic, urging one another to escape while they still could. Raoul had laughed, pointing out that escape was impossible now, as the Institute was already swarming with monsters. He had then reminded the berserker that killing was unnecessary, as he still needed test subjects. With a twisted sense of humour, Raoul had joked that he should have dressed as a nurse, then had asked General Brown for his opinion. He had remarked that there had originally been 121 people on the first floor, and now every one of them had become a water-craving monster. As the berserkers grabbed at the general, moaning for water, Raoul had expressed disgust at being splashed with blood, although he conceded that the general had done a good job, if only for a short while. After all, General Brown had once been one of the 5 most powerful people in the kingdom. Raoul had observed that the monsters were stronger than expected, the drug's effects surpassing his predictions. Yet the monsters continued to beg monotonously for water. The hero had told them gently that he would take good care of them, and now it was time to move on. One of the berserkers had suddenly roared louder than the rest and charged at Raoul. The hero had mentally noted that this one was faster and far less obedient, and concluded that it needed to be punished. Cursing at the sight of his bloodied clothes, he had questioned what it felt like for these scientists to drink the very drug they had created. He had vowed to keep playing with them until the end, unwilling to waste such a golden opportunity. Glancing at the clock, he had estimated that there were only about 5 minutes left before the final phase. In their current state, these so-called elite researchers were no better than wild animals. Raoul had revealed to himself that he had already investigated their crimes thoroughly. He knew how callously they had treated the soldiers, discarding them like tools, not as people, but as expendables. Raoul saw the entire institute as a nest of corruption, a breeding ground for arrogance and cruelty. None of the 231 scholars, in his view, had possessed even a shred of decency. All he cared about was continuing his journey. He had stated that the torment of the researchers was a pleasant sight, and he hoped to see even more. He knew the drug's timeline well. The first transformation occurred immediately after ingestion, the second at the 10-minute mark, and at 15 minutes, the subjects entered a self-destruction phase. Watching the unfolding chaos, Raoul had laughed and said this was the best show he had ever seen. His thoughts had turned momentarily to the supply soldiers, those who had once wanted to join his army, those who had admired him, and now he was finally avenging them. They had believed they were safe working the delivery line, while Raoul had been on the front lines, cutting down the monsters in a desperate attempt to protect them. But ultimately, the real threat hadn't been out there. It had been within, among their own ranks. Raoul had remarked that everything was proceeding exactly as he had hoped. Once he was finished on this floor, he intended to summon another 110 individuals from the second floor to give them their share of the drug. After that, he had planned to head up for a medical checkup on the top floor.